Stars perish one by one when dawn breaks over the Mexican Mennonite community. Life is slow here, but for those who are accustomed to this slow and subtle rhythm, miracles happen every day. It is still dark outside when Johan's family gathers around the dining table. There are no sounds in the room other than the crying of a cow and the ticking of the clock. Now words are spoken, and no eye contact is made. Only a person who has the courage of a celestial hero can manage to break this silence. Soon, we realize what the silence is all about. Drawn to themselves, they seem to have been praying. Once the speaking with the omnipotent is over, however, conversations start flowing around the table. Breakfast is quickly devoured, and the family heads outside to re-engage in their daily activities. It all seems to work like clockwork. No one is objecting to anything, no problems are discussed, and no special feelings are evoked. Only Esther forgets to get something from the house, and gets back to fetch it when she sees something unusual. It is a speckle of dust, emerging on the surface of their perfectly polished lives. Johan is sitting alone at the table like a mute, and he is definitely troubled by something. Slowly, Esther approaches him, advising him to remain by himself for a while. The couple expresses love then, and without quickening pace, Esther rejoins the others. And so, the head of the family is left alone. Johan draws back into himself, and what he finds there is too distressing to keep close. Trying to avert his attention, the man walks around the kitchen in search of a chore. But the table, with its promise of an emotional drain, is so gravitating that he finds himself sitting by it very soon. Here is when we first see cracks in Johan's surface existence. As if he were trying not to sneeze, the man strives to keep himself together, but bit by bit, islands of cries shoot out from his mouth. Johan is tormented by something that burns inside. The smoke wants to come out, but the man fears both the fire and the smoke. Unfortunately for him, he is only a human. When the sun comes out, Johan gets inside his truck and drives away towards farmland. Fetching his mended crankshaft from the mechanic named Zacharias, he engages in a conversation that sheds light on what is going on in his life. As it turns out, Johan has been seeing another woman outside of his marriage. It all seems to be very serious. Zacharias even goes as far as to say that this woman is the love of Johan's life, and that he has to accept his destiny. It takes courage to drop everything you have and take a step towards what's been reserved for you by the Creator. It is painful for Johan to think about it. As much as he loves this other woman, he has a family. A brave man to him is a man who makes his destiny with whatever he's got. Zacharias also has a point though. Perhaps by resisting this burning feeling, Johan is actively betraying himself. Here, we first hear the name of the woman, Mary Ann. Johan feels he is meant to be with her, and Zachariah adds that this feeling must be founded on something sacred, the power that governs the universe and cannot be denied or understood. The cheerfulness of Johan's personality is better shown when he hears music coming out of the garage. Even though the subject of his conversation is dreadful and dreary, he asks the men over there to turn the music up and drives away, singing and smiling. His face is bright and shiny when he sees Mary Ann that afternoon. Enlightened by some internal light, the two lean towards each other, and closing their eyes, plant a kiss on each other. Their lips brush against each other for eternity. They are like two young people, completely overtaken by love. Later that day, the family is at a pool, washing and cooling in the scorching weather. Their diverse personalities are slowly emerging over the surface. It is clear that they love each other. They are very close. For the children, this is a fun activity, a chance to connect. But for the adults, everything is much more complex. Even though they appear happy and fulfilled as a couple, some unexpressed sorrow is lurking in their words. That night, upon returning home, a storm caught up to the family. Rain clicks on the surface of Johan's truck as he holds Esther's hand. Their children are sleeping in the back seats, so they won't be able to see what is happening in front of them. Silently, their father, an image of stability, control, and authority, is weeping. Streams of tears are shining on his face. Esther must be the only one seeing this. It is the secret of adults. Life continues to flow at this slow pace until, one morning, we pick up the story again. Here, Johan visits his mother and father. The pain has been growing inside the man for some time, and it has reached a point where he is forced to seek guidance. Johan must know that the news will trouble his father a lot, but he has no other choice. Seeking him out on a farm, he tells him that he fell in love with another woman outside his marriage. At first, the father remains silent. He thinks it must be a joke, but unfortunately, from the expressions of his son, he quickly realizes that he is telling the truth. This conversation needs some air, so he leads Johan outside. This is when we learn that it is already winter in Mexico. Walking together, the father and the son try to seek appropriate words for the situation, but the crunching snow is the only one making noise for a long time. The father breaks the silence then. Choosing the most ordinary of subjects, he notices how harvesting will be delayed this season, but the mere act of breaking the silence is enough to start a real conversation. Johan says that it has almost been 2 years since this other woman appeared in his life. Esther and many others have known each other since the very beginning, but he doesn't want his mother to know. Standing outside and looking over at the bleak, bright field, the father gives out no advice. He merely listens and accepts this news as a fact. He promises not to tell Johan's mother as well. It is only when the duo enters Johan's childhood house that the father finally stops listening and starts talking. As it turns out, from his point of view, it is the devil that is at work in Johan's mind. Sharing something he has never told his son, the man says that he went through a similar experience after Johan was born. Smiling, he remembers how he felt love towards another woman, and how he managed to dissolve that feeling in his heart. Soon, the pain it caused faded away, and he realized that falling in love with another was only caused by his need for excitement. Life needs color, and sometimes even the most important and meaningful things turn gray. Love towards the meaningful becomes ordinary, and the organism craves to feel it. This is what happened to him, and there is a great chance that the same is taking place in Johan's life as well. The latter chooses to view this situation from a different point of view, however. Somehow, his thought process deduces that he made a mistake when he married Esther. Sometimes he thinks that it is God's will for him to go to Marianne and correct the mistake he made years ago. The father doesn't have much more to say. Finishing up the conversation, he gives out the last piece of advice, the one that cannot be denied. If Johan doesn't act quickly, he will surely lose both Marianne and Esther. As time continues to tick on, the harvesting season begins. Together with other members of the family, Esther works in the field. There is a great corn harvest and a lot to be grateful for. Just before beginning to eat together with his wife and 2 children, Johan notices someone on the field and walks away to check who they are. As it turns out, the woman has come to fetch a word from Marianne. As always, Johan chooses to be honest, so, coming back, he says the whole truth. He has to go to Marianne's business and bring her 2 urgent deliveries. Esther isn't upset at all. She just wants him to bring the kids along and take them to a dentist. Getting inside Marianne's restaurant in the next scene, the kids start wondering what to get when Marianne offers their father to come inside her office to prepare his invoice. Preparing the invoice is the last thing they do, however. Having a chance to be alone with each other, they endeavor to make the most of this moment. To them, this is a small window to unity. Getting undressed slowly and silently, they embrace one another, gazing meaningfully at the window. They close the curtains and go to bed. Here, we get a glimpse into Marianne's mind for the first time. Even though she loves Johan and desires to be with him in her dreams, this small moment of unity is tormenting her. Transported from the dream world, this intimate moment of being with Johan changes its form in reality. In the end, Marianne is sure that this is the last time they are together. In her mind, peace is stronger than love. Johan is the best man she has ever known, but as sorrowful as it is to her, they must separate. Still, neither of them has any regrets. They dedicated a small portion of their lives to one another, but sadness made meaningful memories that will last forever. Soon, more pain will come, but once the torment of separation fades away, only lovely memories will remain, and peacefully, they will continue their lives in happiness. After spending time with Marianne, Johan goes down to fetch his kids. As it turns out, they are with a man named Bobby in his van. The kids are watching TV when their dad comes up to them. Compared to their father, they are clearly at peace. Watching them listen to a French singer on the screen, Marianne and Johan get a glimpse into what it feels like to be at peace. It is a shame they cannot be free, and that they can never be truly at peace together. Once Johan joins his kids, the doors of the van are closed, and Marianne finds herself on the other side. The kids might love to watch the French singer on the screen inside the van, especially when they have no idea what the man is singing about. His comical, exaggerated expressions cheer them up, and being with their father, they get a sense of security. Marianne, in the meantime, walks back to her restaurant silently. The next morning, the entire family is gathered to have breakfast together. The gaze that Esther is passing down around the table sheds some light on what she might be thinking. Once the praying is over and eating begins, we learn that the married couple is planning to go away for a day. The kids will be staying on their own, so the older ones must take care of the young ones. The parents trust them to handle life on their own. Soon, in the middle of lunch, they hear a knock on the door. A person who we do not see asks to speak with Johan. Without hearing what the conversation was about, we arrived at Johan's car in the next scene. The married couple are driving down the road. As usual, silence has the entire hegemony over the air inside, until Esther decides to break it. She gets interested in who asked for him at the door and what they wanted. As always, Johan doesn't lie to his wife. The woman at the door seems to have come on behalf of Marianne again. As it turns out, she needs to see him. Esther doesn't respond to anything at first, but suddenly, after a few seconds of silence, she curses Marianne in her last words. Her anger is reserved, but through her controlled rage, a great deal of bitterness and resentment are expressed. Johan tries to protect Marianne's name, of course. He admits that he has failed not to see her again, and points out that it's hard for her as well. Esther has no doubt that she's tormented too. As silence regains its hegemony, she remembers something and realizes how her marriage has changed. Once, while traveling like this, they couldn't stop singing. Silence then felt more comfortable and peaceful, and life was full of happiness. Both Esther and Johan felt one with the world. They felt alive and in love, while right now they feel like lone hermits, standing at the iron bars of a large gate, gazing sorrowfully at what they've lost on the other side. They wish just to be able to close their eyes and wake up in the past when the connection is still strong. Rain starts falling then. Over the sound of rattling raindrops on the windscreen, Johan changes the subject. This is the only way to avert attention from the sorrowful realization that time only moves forward. Sure, you can gaze at your side mirrors all day, but your car will always be driving ahead. There is no telling where the married couple is going, but they are almost there. Suddenly, Esther develops travel sickness and asks Johan to stop the car immediately. Getting out, she demands that he stay in the car and get out into the pouring rain alone. As a river of water comes down on his windscreen, Johan tries to make out what his wife is doing, but the woman is out of his view. He cannot see her, but we can. Clearly, the motion sickness was a lie. It was the relationship with her husband and the heavy air inside the car that suffocated Esther so much that she felt it was necessary to get far from Johan as soon as possible. Hugging a tree in the forest, pelting rain falls over her as she cries her heart out. Her voice is scarcely heard over the sound of roaring clouds, and her tears aren't visible in the rain. When a few minutes go by, Johan feels restless. He gets out of his car and walks into the wilderness to find his wife. Walking around, he first sees the umbrella he gave her earlier, floating aimlessly in the wind. Realizing that she must be near, he looks around then and captures a glimpse of her, lying unconscious in the mud. He walks up to her in a rush, takes her in his hands, and failing to bring her back, screams his lungs out for help. His voice fades out in the wet air. There is no chance that somebody can hear him. No matter how hard he cries, he will still be lying on the ground alone with the unconscious body of his wife. As minutes go by, the storm passes away. In the late evening, Johan tries to bring Esther's body to the car, and exhausted, falls down a few feet away from it. Thankfully, a truck stops to give him a hand. Two kind men jump out and move towards Johan to learn what has happened, but the man is petrified. None of the questions reach his consciousness, as he just lays there stiffly, looking at nothing. His soul is as hard and as alive as a rock. Thankfully, his frozen mind is somewhat melted in the end, and they bring Esther to a hospital. In the next scene, Johan is sitting in the lobby of a hospital, drawn to himself and waiting to hear the worst. Unfortunately, when the doctor comes out and sits beside him, he passes out the kind of information Johan has been waiting for. As it turns out, Esther suffered a terrible heart attack, and her body couldn't take it. Johan knows that Esther couldn't have been in any risk groups for a heart attack. Only immeasurable stress and sorrow could have caused such a terrible end to her. The kids are confused and scared during the funeral in the next scene. Failing to participate in the communal grief, they look around aimlessly, trying to get the heads and tails of the situation. Their father is simply gazing at the air, looking at nothing in particular. Spiraling down inside himself, his suffering gets greater over time. As the mourners sing loudly, Esther's body is being prepared. Sarah, their eldest daughter, is helping with the preparation process as well. It must be a depressing experience for the young one. After the women, the men get inside the room where Esther's soulless body rests. They bring it over into a coffin, and one by one, they say goodbye to Esther. Kneeled down, Johan takes too much time, leaning over her wife's coffin. He has to be torn away from this spot by his father. Other men, including Esther's eldest son, say their farewells then, and together they walk outside the room, leaving Johan and his father alone with the corpse. The conversation between them sheds some light on Johan's thoughts. Naturally, he blames himself for Esther's passing. The counter-argument to this is that he is nothing in the face of all of this. He is just a little man who has little power over who expires and who lives. Only God decides who to take. Johan's response to these counter-arguments is silence. At the funeral comes Marianne too. Johan is trying to hold his tears in front of his kids when his friend catches a glimpse of her and indicates that she has come. Without much ceremony, Johan goes out to meet her then. He leads her around the house and stops her at the door. Failing to maintain eye contact, they have a small conversation here. It is when Marianne embraces Johan that the sun shoots its rays at them in full force. Enlightened by the light, Marianne puts a shade on her eyes, but only for a couple of seconds. Johan is weeping on her shoulder when she expresses the will to see Esther for once. Johan doesn't resist. Calming himself down, he accepts her request. The morning room is dreadfully silent in the next scene. Johan opens the door to Marianne, which leads to Esther, and lets her go inside alone. And so, the two women appear in one room for the first time. Esther in the coffin, and Marianne, standing over her with a meaningful gaze. As if she wanted to read something on her forehead, she kneels down and stares at Esther's face. Suddenly she leans over her coffin, in one very slow motion, kisses her on the lips, and draws back at the same pace. A single drop of tears falls from her eye and lands on the cheek of the corpse. For a moment, it almost feels as if it's Esther crying with the tears of Marianne. This unusual scene represents, in a way, the similitude of their sufferings. This drop of tear unites the two in a strange way, but the most surprising, fairy tale-like thing is yet to come. Suddenly Esther awakes. Drawing a few breaths, she opens her blue eyes and, thinking of the poor Johan, starts crying her own tears. There is no need, however, to shed any more tears for Johan. Esther is back from the spirit realm. Back in the living room, a clock is being rewinded before the word is taken to Johan. Nobody believes it until they see it with their own eyes. The miracle done by the silent light.